Hey, read through the word. Today is May 20th, and today's lesson is called Wisdom. Yes, here we go. Here we are with Solomon. So let's take a look at where we are. We are in 1 Kings chapter 3, and it says, at that night, so this is the verses we're looking at, and then I'm going to sort of catch us up to where we are. All right. It says, that night the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, what do you want? Ask, and I'll give it to you. And Solomon replied, you showed great and faithful love to your servant, my father David, because he was honest and true and faithful to you. And you continued to show this great and faithful love to him today by giving him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord, my God, you've made me king instead of my father David. But I'm like a little child who doesn't know his way around. And here I am in the midst of your chosen people, a nation so great and numerous that they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours? Okay, so here we are with Solomon. I love the beginning of Solomon's story. He has everything going for him, and he shows that. There's some great warnings, and before we start talking about Solomon, just a great reminder to us, Solomon's a sinner. He's going to mess up. He's got a problem, and we'll start to see the things that ensnare him, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in our readings as we come to them. But so let's see where we are right now. Now, David, who was the beloved and still to this day the best known king of Israel, David's died, and there was a fight for the throne. Adonijah, the oldest, wanted the throne. He attempted 2 times and ended up dead to take the throne. But here's the thing. This is not really part of the lesson. This is just part of Lisa being nerdy. Here's the thing about Solomon that it is for us to notice. He is not the first in the throne. I think we've talked about this before. He's not first. He's not the first son. The point is, God chooses who will be on the throne. God chooses. This is the way God's done everything from the beginning. You remember, Esau was born first, but God chose Jacob. He did that with the sons of Jacob, and then when he got the sons of Joseph, he swapped them. So this is God chooses who God will choose. That's his point here. And so Solomon is put on the throne. Adonijah didn't like it, and that's in the first part of the readings. But now Solomon is the king on the throne. Now, in the story of the Bible, which I will talk more about at conference, this is the end of the time period known as the United Kingdom. There are 3 kings during the United Kingdom period. There is Saul, there is David, and then there is Solomon. And Solomon's the last king of the United period. And so he follows. And so I want you to think about this. Think about big shoes to fill. Solomon has been placed on the throne. His own family thinks he shouldn't be there, except for his mama. And old Bathsheba stepped up. She's like, you're not going to do this to my kid. God promised him the throne, and he will be on it. And so you see all that, but Solomon saw his father lead a nation. And David had his sin problems. And it destroyed his family. The consequences of his sin destroyed his family. But he was well loved by his people. He's still well loved today by the Jewish people. The Star of David is their symbol. It's all David. So he was David, and now you're like David's son, and you're on the throne. And of all things, And so just think about that for a second. We're going to sit with Solomon in this today and understand what's going on in his life and how then we're going to take it and how to apply it. He has been placed into a calling he never expected in life. Never expected. As far as he's like, that's what he says, I'm not a leader. I'm not the firstborn. I am not prepared for this. I don't know what to do, God. He acknowledges here, and so here's the first thing we need to see here. Solomon shows humility, and he acknowledges, I can't do this, God. You've called me for a purpose, and I don't know how to do it. You could say, watch this. I'll be king. Now, we're going to watch his son do that. But Solomon says, I can't do this. He shows humility, and he shows he acknowledges a need. He has a need. His need is, I can't lead these people, God. And that's the first step we see, that humility and acknowledging that he had a need. And then Solomon's request. Now, we always call it as for wisdom, but I really like the New Living Translation about to give me an understanding heart. That's really, because I think we think, now he does become, we'll see the limit, there's no limit to his wisdom, as far as his wisdom applies to all areas of life, and science and nature and all sorts of things. But he asks for an understanding heart. And here's the key to this. Because he asks for wisdom and understanding heart. And James chapter 1 tells us if any of us lacks that, we should ask of God, because he will give it to us. And so Solomon's request was for the ability, for this wisdom, not to prop himself up, not to make himself well known, which everything will happen like that, but he asks for it so that he can lead God's people well. God, you have put these people in a place for a purpose. I don't want to mess it up. I want to make your name known. I want to lead your people well, and I know my own self. I can't do it. I acknowledge that I need you, God. You've got to give me something to be able to do this. And we see that God looks at Solomon and understands the reason he asks is from a pure heart. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you imagine? I'm David's kid. I just been put on David's throne, and I'm not David. I'm not David. I can't do this. Please help me, God. Give me wisdom, and you have it. The only place I can find wisdom is from you. So I'm asking you to please give that to me. And because he asked with a pure heart and for the purpose of leading the people, for their purpose, for what they've made, so that they can make his name known, he does it. God does it. Because what Solomon did was Solomon focused on God's people and God's glory in the request. There is a huge lesson for us to learn, because what we see here is this prayer of Solomon. Solomon's motive was right. Good old James. James tells us in James chapter 4 that why don't we receive what we pray for? Because we pray with the wrong motives. Solomon's not praying with the wrong motives. His prayer is aligned with the will of God and the purpose of God. So that's an automatic yes. His prayer has aligned with the will of God and the purpose of God. That's a yes. Pure motive, everything. And then what happens? God supplies. For every need, God supplies. That's who he is. He supplies the need, what he needs. And then Solomon recognizes the gift that he's been given by God. And that God's gifts that he gives us are not used for our own purposes. They're used for his people, and for his purpose. And then what you see is Solomon acted with the gift. You continue on reading that he gets the gift. The very next thing is the story that we know of the two mothers and the baby. He acts on the gift. So we have a pattern here of obedience that we need to take a look at. And alliteration, here we come. What you see is that Solomon acknowledges he has a need. It takes humility, but Solomon acknowledges that he has a need. And that, and so he's like, he acknowledges in humility, and then he asks. He asks God to supply the need for the purposes of God, not for the purposes of Solomon. And then he doesn't just sit on it. He acts. Everything in the Christian life is that. God acts and we respond. God acts and Solomon responds. God gives him the wisdom and Solomon uses it. He doesn't just hoard it. He doesn't just hoard it. He uses it for the edification of the people and for the glory of God. And we can do that too. We can. I had my students, it's the last week of school. Today's the 19th. Today's the last day of school at my school. I got teacher work days, but today's our last day. And I had a student that came up to me the other day because they had a presentation to do, and she was really, really scared. And I said, I'm going to tell you something funny about Mrs. Nance that you might not know. I said, do you know what an extrovert and an introvert is? And she said, yeah. I said, what do you think I am? She said, you're an extrovert. I said, no, I'm not. I said, I happen to be an introvert that God has gifted with extrovert giftings. I said, God gave me a gift that takes me out of who I am, that makes me into somebody that normally I would not be. I'm acting on that. And I said, when I was your age, I said, I would not ask for ketchup at McDonald's. I still remember that. I used to ask my sister, who's 2.5 years younger than me, can you go get ketchup? Because I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to have to talk in front of people. Yes, let's laugh now that what God called me to do. And so that Solomon had been called to something that he was not prepared for. He could not do on his own. That's the point. We're all called to something we can't do on our own. I am called to something that in my own self I am not capable of doing. Everybody thinks I have this greatest memory. I can't remember. Like, we're out of so many things in my house because I can't remember to go pick them up. But I can tell you stuff in the Bible. But because God has done that. That's not me. God has done something because He gifted me for me to be used to edify His people and to glorify His name. So He gets all the glory. And that's what's going to happen with Solomon. Everything that's given to Solomon is for God to get the glory. And we're going to watch as even the pagans come to glorify God because Solomon acted on what God had provided for him. So we'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.